Welcome to today's episode of Between Neens and Deens. My name is Nina, and I'm joined by my best friend, partner, and baby daddy, Dayon.
And together, we're a couple of 20-something-year-olds just trying to navigate this whole first-time parenting thing.
So we're laying it all out there and talking about all the things you wish your parents told you about love, sex, and happiness. So we're back with our second episode, and today we're going to be talking all about the decision-making process of whether or not we wanted to go through with this pregnancy. And this is definitely a bit of a sensitive topic, so I'm just going to warn you guys, we're definitely going to talk about abortion. Very fitting for International Women's Day. Happy International Women's Day, B.
Oh yes, happy International Women's Day.
It's an important topic, and it's an important thing to discuss. So I just wanted to warn you guys so you know what you're getting into. But the first thing, just off the top, whenever I do talk about things like this, which I have discussed before on my YouTube, people do ask me like how I feel about my future child knowing that there was a decision-making process that had to take place and that he wasn't planned. And I feel like as he grows older, it would be important for me to instill in him the fact that this is a really big decision. It's not something that should be taken lightly, and it's something that requires a lot of time and energy. So I don't think it's embarrassing. I don't think that it's anything to feel shame about. And it's also just like weird to think about like kids making fun of other kids on the playground for being like, you were unplanned, like I was a planned baby. Like I don't know, like that's
a weird flex for sure.
Super weird flex. So I don't know, I think that a lot of that just has to do with the social stigma around just choice in general, and I want to be able to talk about it, and I think that people should have space to talk about it and hear other people's experiences because it really does help. So this is going to be our story. Are you ready?
I am ready. It is a huge decision to make, and having like your own choice is really important.
So we found out when I was 7 weeks pregnant. So obviously that's quite late for a period, and I definitely did notice that my period was late, but to be fair, my period is quite irregular. So normally it's like 4 to 6 weeks, and in the past I've definitely had scares before. So at this point I am like, okay, my period's late, but like it's fine, it's normal. But 7 weeks is a bit late. Like 6, I'm like, okay, we're at the cusp, it's probably coming. But 7 is like, yeah, no, something's up. So
7
basically,
weeks and feeling like a little bit nauseous.
Yeah, okay, so I was feeling nauseous. So I've definitely been asked before, like if I did feel any signs or if it just kind of came out of nowhere, but I did feel nauseous. But at that time I was taking like different supplements and like vitamins and things like that I had newly just integrated into my routine. I just assumed that the nausea, because like I was told that it could cause nausea, some of the pills, that I was like, oh, like it's probably just related to that. So I cut those out. There just wasn't enough time for me to be like, oh, okay, like that wasn't it, it's something else. And also at that time we went to New York for my birthday. I think we were just so caught up in like traveling and eating all this food, and you know, you're probably just jet lagged, and we were actually drinking for my birthday. We weren't like heavy binge drinking.
No, it was just like maybe like a beer or two.
Yeah, it was like a beer.
Like
it was like, yeah, like
was.
cocktails, like, but I wasn't like binge drinking by any means. And I mean, there are also people that do when they don't know that they're pregnant, and everything turns out okay, but that definitely was also a concern when we did find out that we were actually pregnant. Anyways, so
I think the biggest concern for me was when we ate oysters, and I was like really concerned about like what like raw seafood would do. But if it doesn't make you feel sick, it's usually not an actual issue for the baby.
Basically, we were in New York, and I was like kind of drinking, so I was like, okay, like I'm a little bit nauseous, probably just hungover, it's fine. And I think just because so much was happening, I didn't really tune into my body the way that I would have if I was just at home with not a whole lot of stuff going on. And so basically the day that we came back to Vancouver from New York, I woke up that morning in New York. We were like getting ready for our flight, and I was so nauseous. Like this was nausea that I like couldn't ignore. I felt awful if I stood up, if I drank water, if I laid down, if I closed my eyes. Like it didn't matter what I was doing. I was so nauseous.
But there was no vomiting though.
There was no vomiting. I didn't actually, throughout like my whole kind of first trimester, I really only vomited maybe like 3 or 4 times, and all those times were actually related to me brushing my teeth. and
So it's
it
not
was
like
always
it's
vile.
not like a Hollywood pregnancy where
No.
they like directly go into the toilet and then they know that they're pregnant.
That's what you learn very early on about being pregnant, is that Hollywood is a lie. So much of what they tell you about pregnancy is inaccurate, and it's a lot of it is based off of fear, or also just the fact that like your water breaks and it's like this huge, like it's usually not that dramatic of a thing. I mean, some women do really get so nauseous that they're constantly puking. Like, thankfully that wasn't me. It was just nausea where I didn't feel the need to throw up, and I don't think that if I had thrown up that it would have gone away, which is usually, like when you're hungover and you feel nauseous, that's usually what you do, because you're like, hey, if you just throw up, just stick your finger down your throat, like it's gonna be okay, you're gonna feel better afterwards. I don't think it was that type of nausea. So basically we came back to Vancouver that day. Dan's mom actually picked us up from the airport, and Dan was like, yeah, just like don't really talk to her because she's not feeling well. She's feeling very nauseous. And his mom's like whole face lit up. She was like so excited because she was like, oh my God, I think she's pregnant. And I'm just in the back seat like, God, fuck my life. This sucks.
She called it.
Yeah. I mean, but that's the thing, is that I knew too, like we joked about it while we were in New York, and we joked about it because my period was so late that I was like, I don't know, I think I might be pregnant, guys. But I just said that, and it's not like I really actually understood what that meant or like the reality of it. And so basically we go home. Actually on our way home we picked up a pregnancy test. So we go home, and immediately I'm like, okay, drop everything, let's do this thing. And so Dan was with me the whole entire time. Usually when you take a pregnancy test, like you have to set your timer for like 3 minutes because it takes a little while to actually show up, like the cross on the pregnancy test.
I was getting ready. I had the phone out.
Yeah, I was like, okay, set your alarm. And I was like sitting on the toilet. I started peeing on it, and just like instantly this cross hit, and it was like, you're so pregnant. And I was not expecting that at all, because all the pregnancy tests that I've taken in the past, like you have to set your alarm. They say don't look at it because it might like, I don't know, make you super nervous. So just pee on it, flip it, don't look at it, wait 3 minutes and check. But this was instant. And I was like, B, just stop. You don't need to set the alarm.
Just sitting there trying to set, okay, 30 seconds or 60 seconds.
Yeah, I was like, no, don't worry,
like,
we don't need it. We don't need it, yeah.
I'm immediately pregnant.
We bought the test that had like 2 different kinds. So it was the one that shows you a cross, and then the other one is digital. Technology is crazy these days.
Insane.
And so the other one shows
like,
you, it says pregnant or not pregnant, like it actually shows up on the screen, and it says how many weeks. And it's important to read the directions on these things, because I peed on that one afterwards because I was like, we got to make sure. And I also wanted to know how like far along I was. On the stick, it said pregnant 3+ weeks. And so automatically I assumed, oh, I'm 3 weeks pregnant or 3+ weeks pregnant. But then I actually read it later, and it's actually 3+ weeks from when your last period should have been. So that means that I was 7 weeks or 7 weeks plus along. So yeah, make sure you read the instructions, because those are 2 very big differences, being like 3 weeks pregnant or 7 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, luckily you knew when your last period was. Is because you posted on Instagram.
Yeah, thank God. Thank God I posted.
Because normally you don't really track it.
I don't track it, and I never share when I'm on my period with Instagram, but I was really feeling myself that last period, and
it was a cute photo.
It was a cute photo, yeah. So like thankfully I was like, today was the first day of my period and I feel great. And like that was the day of my last period. And
what are the chances?
I know. So
I feel like there's so many signs that just like point towards all of this happening, and that.
Yeah, okay, but you're making it seem like it was like a dreamy, beautiful journey, and it was rough.
It had its moments.
I mean, like the second that we found out, like, I mean, we're laughing about this now, but in that moment, I just went completely numb. Like I wasn't happy, I wasn't sad, I was just so shocked. And that's the thing, is that like you can joke about it beforehand, like, you know, like we weren't being that safe when we were having sex either, and like, yeah, like all these things are possibilities, but then when it actually hits you and it's real, it feels so different.
Completely
so different. Yeah. And for Dayon, like, I mean, you can talk about your instant reaction to it and what you were experiencing.
Yeah, for me, I was really excited, and I was like, a part of me was like, my guys can swim. But no, I was really excited, and I felt like I needed to let you know how I felt about it, but then also give you your space to make the decision that is right for you, because it is a huge decision for both of us. Ultimately, it would change our lives completely. So yeah, I needed you to know like what you wanted, so that there wouldn't be any resentment or just like any regret.
But you were happy. You were
but
so
ultimately,
happy.
I was very happy. This was something that I wanted, and I was like, I'm happy that it's with you and that we're in this position of life, and I think it works. Like I was really happy. I was so excited. So I just had to let you know that, and then go from there. For you, it felt like there was.
I feel like it was like, because it happened so quickly. Like the second that like my pee hit the stick and we knew, like you were so happy and you like couldn't hide it, and I just started crying. Like I was just so. Which is
I feel like it was very understandable.
I think you went from like being excited and really happy to being like, oh, pee, very quickly, because I couldn't really express. I couldn't talk about it at that period of time. Like, I just was so in my head. And I honestly wasn't even really thinking. I was just, like, I don't know how else to describe it besides being really numb. And it was just so overwhelming. We had traveled all day. It was, by now, I think, like, 8 p.m. And so I was really tired. So I basically was just like, okay, like, I just want to go to sleep. And we'll talk about this tomorrow. And, I cried myself to sleep. And it wasn't because I was sad or because I didn't know what to feel. And I think that scared me a lot, because it's so rare that I'm in that type of position. Like I've never really felt that way before. And so the next morning I woke up and I don't know if I would say that I felt better, but I wasn't crying. And so I was like, okay, like I knew that I needed to give myself time and space. And so I was like, hey, I want to take a bath. So I was in the bath and Dan was like sitting in the bathroom with me, and we were kind of just talking about it. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, if we do decide that we want to go through with this, we would have to move, because our apartment was a 1-bedroom. I mean, if you guys have seen the apartment tour on YouTube,
it was already cramped for us.
We were running out of space. Yeah. So I was like, okay, well then we would have to move. So then we just for shits and giggles decided to look up 2-bedroom apartments in Vancouver, and we ended up looking at 3 different places that day, and we weren't doing anything that day. So I was like, this will be nice to like kind of take my mind off of it, do something else. And I was just so in a haze. And so I was like, let's go look at apartments. This will be fun. The first one was god awful.
It was horrible.
It was awful.
Horrible.
And they're all so expensive because it's Vancouver. And the second one is the one that we were currently living in now. So it was the perfect one. And
literally like a dream. When we walked in, we were like, this is perfect.
To be fair, the most expensive one. So it wasn't an easy choice to make to decide to move in here. And then the third one was just like one of those really new like Vancouver apartments, but also really small, has a pillar in it, which Dayon hates.
That's like every new Vancouver building has like the white pillar.
Yeah. But basically, like, I mean, the only reason why I'm talking about this now is because I really flip-flopped during this period of time of like, okay, let's entertain having the child, and then let's entertain not having it. And like, what do those two realities look like? What are we really dealing with here? And what was really interesting was that when we looked at our apartment, and like the one that we have now, our dream apartment, surprisingly, I thought that I would see it and then feel like, okay, like I want to move in here. I want to start a family here. But weirdly enough, my initial feeling was, oh my God, it's a 2-bedroom apartment. The second one could be my office. And if anything, it kind of made me want to continue my life not having a child. Like the way that it already is. It was very interesting. I wasn't expecting that at all. And I was like, is this a sign of like me being selfish and like wanting all of these other things in my life that I felt that I didn't have yet, and so therefore I wasn't ready to kind of give up my life as it is. So during the beginning part of my decision-making process, which in total was 3 weeks, it was 3 weeks from the time that we found out, and I was 7 weeks pregnant, to 10 weeks when I had actually made a decision about something. It was a very long period of time, but at the beginning of it, I was definitely leaning more towards having an abortion. And it's also just interesting because during that period of time, we had decided beforehand, before we ever found out that we were pregnant, that Dayon was going to start working for me and helping me with, I guess, building my career. And so it was
felt like a lot of changes.
It was so many changes all at once. And so I was like, okay, like, I mean, we can obviously have a child again in the future. Like, we are fertile, so it's just a matter of, is now the right time? Like, that's really what it was. Because for me, like, Dayon really wanted to have this child. I knew that I had the support. I knew that we were in a stable relationship, and like the possibility of breaking up over this wasn't a possibility. Like I knew that no matter what, he would support me in.
No matter what your decision was,
yeah, like
I was here for you.
Yeah, so really what it was at the end of the day was, is this the right time? There were so many things to consider, and I was considering, one, my career and where it was at, and I kind of felt like, yeah, like there's a lot of room to grow. Like there's a lot of things that I want to do. Like last year we traveled a ton, and like that's just the first year. I also considered our financial stability, and I definitely feel like I'm in a place where I could have a child right now, and I feel very stable. So that wasn't really an issue for me. You always do kind of consider what other people will think and how your family will feel, how your friends will feel. I mean, I didn't really even consider it, just because I already knew that.
Our parents were the first to find out.
Yeah.
Like, we told them immediately.
Oh, I 100% skipped this part.
Yeah.
So before we went to go look at the apartments, I was still in my daze, and I really honestly was in this daze for a couple of days.
She needed her mommy.
Yeah, I needed my mom. Like, I really felt, I mean, whenever I feel really sick or really awful or really sad, I always miss the comforts of home. And so that next morning, the first person I told, besides Dayon, obviously, because he was there, was my mom. And so I FaceTimed her. I didn't even think twice about it. And like, my relationship with my parents hasn't always been this open. Like when I was in high school, it 100% was very secretive, and I was very scared of like trying to tell them anything that might upset them, like me being pregnant and not married.
But probably in those times when you were concerned, it would be an issue.
Yeah.
Because you were probably really young, but
I think all of those things made it, and my relationship with my parents has really shifted over the last couple years. To be a lot more open and honest. And so all of those things, I was like, I know that no matter what, like I just want my parents to know, I want my mom to know, and to like have her support. Like I wasn't scared at all of her being like, oh my God, like how could you do this? Like, I can't believe you're pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And even if she did, I mean, it would be incredibly upsetting, but at the end of the day, I'd be like, okay, never mind, I can't talk to you. I don't want this energy in my life right now. And so I FaceTimed her, and my dad wasn't home then, so it was just my mom, and I told her, we're pregnant, and I was crying so much, and I didn't know what to do, and she was like, oh my God, how did you guys let this happen? But in like a joking, like, oh, like, be like, stop crying kind of way. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what to do, like, I don't know, like, should I fly, like, can I fly you up here, like, should I fly down to San Francisco? Like, I just really needed like to kind of escape and be with my thoughts. And she was like, no, like, this is your decision to make, like it's up to you and Dayon to decide. And
she was really good at like not giving her like what she wanted, I mean, like not influencing your like process,
because she didn't have an opinion really. Yeah, she didn't have a preference, and I felt still very confused, because I think a part of me wanted her to have an opinion, which I'm very grateful now that she didn't. But I just needed some kind of guidance from somebody that I like loved and trusted, and that wasn't Dayon, because obviously I knew how he felt about it. And so I'm really, really grateful. And she told me that she was going to tell my dad for me, and to just keep her updated on whatever it was that we decided. So I didn't really talk to her for the next couple of weeks, because over the next couple of weeks, I didn't really inform anybody. I didn't really even talk to Dayon, because everything was happening in my head, and I didn't want to flip-flop on people. I didn't want to be like, okay, today I feel like keeping the baby, and today I don't feel like keeping the baby. Like, it was just too much to bring everyone else on this emotional roller coaster with me. So she was like, just let me know when you decide. And I think they ended up calling me maybe 2 weeks later, and at that point I was like going to go through with an abortion. So I told them, and they were like, oh, okay. Like, I think my dad like said something like that it was kind of sad, just because it was a beautiful thing, and like, but no matter what, like, he respected my decision. And so yeah, I mean, during that period of time, I also told so
my parents the same as well, because that's where I thought that we were really gonna head. I thought that was the direction we were going. So my mom was extremely excited for it, and I had to just let her know like that this decision ultimately is ours to make. And that's kind of where I was at as well, and just kind of giving you still your space to see what you really want.
We just kind of kept everyone at bay, because I really didn't want to take everyone on this emotional roller coaster with me. And it really was up and down, back and forth for 3 weeks. And for most of it, I had decided that I wanted to get an abortion, especially in the beginning. And so usually when you're making an appointment, like you just call in to a clinic and you find one that will give you an appointment. And usually that appointment is not immediate unless you're pretty far along. And me being 7 weeks, I still had some time. So just a little rundown of kind of your options. There was either a medical or a surgical abortion. And the medical would be me taking the pill, which is, I think, probably one of the most common forms, and that you would take and kind of pass in your own space. So you would most likely be at home, and that you can only really do up to about 10 weeks. So I had made an appointment for the medical abortion, and that would have been at 9 weeks. So from 7 to 9 weeks, like I essentially had 2 weeks to kind of decide. But then in the middle of it, as I was doing more research, I was kind of like, okay, as we're getting later, since I can't get an earlier appointment, I think I would actually be more comfortable with a surgical abortion, which is the most common version is the aspiration, which is also known as like the vacuum. And it sounds really scary, but it is slightly more effective, and you leave the doctor's office knowing that it's 100% taken care of because you're there. Whereas with a medical, when you're taking the pill and you're passing at home, then there is a slight chance that it didn't take and that it didn't actually work. And so
that you need surgical anyway.
And then that you would need surgical. And so I was like, if I'm going to do it, like I need to just know, because I want to kind of put myself through as little pain as possible. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, okay, no, I'm going to cancel the medical appointment and make a surgical appointment. And that surgical appointment landed at 10 weeks. And so with a surgical, you can go like anywhere from like up to 14 or 16 weeks. And so for me, like I was like, okay, no matter what, you need to make a decision by that date. You can cancel your appointment if you want to. That is 100% up to you. But by that appointment date, you need to have made up your mind, because if I didn't give myself a deadline, I never would have decided.
This was your own inner monologue.
Yeah, this was all me talking to myself and me just kind of like being a zombie around the house and not really doing anything, because I was so nauseous during this period of time. Like that's the thing too. Like I was so nauseous. Couldn't look at screens or anything. Yeah, I couldn't look at screens. I couldn't look at my phone. I couldn't do work. Sitting up, laying down, walking, eating, not eating, everything made me nauseous. And so I had a lot of time in these 3 weeks to like just not take on a whole lot of work and give myself this space, which I was really, really grateful for, because I also know that not everyone is afforded that opportunity, and it's 100% crucial. And a big portion of that time, I will admit, I did spend kind of trying to not think about it, because I would Netflix a lot. But in the back of my mind, I was always, always, always thinking about, okay, like if we entertain this life, like what is it going to look like? As long as I had decided that I wanted to go through with an abortion, every single day I woke up with extreme anxiety. Like in my stomach, it hurt. Like it was like I couldn't do anything, and I'd never experienced that before. I didn't really know what to make of it, and I just figured that it was because I was going through this whole experience that it was inevitable, because obviously it is creating a lot of anxiety and stress in my life. And it wasn't until 2 days before my appointment date. So at this point, we're already in week 10. 2 days before my appointment date, I woke up and I told Dayon, like, I think that I want to keep the baby. And I knew that if I told him that I had to be sure. Like, I was very careful with my words and what I was telling people during this period of time. And when I told him that, like, one, he was very excited. But it was also the moment that I'd kind of decided that, all of my anxiety went away. And I think that was just kind of my body and my gut knowing, and me subconsciously knowing what it is that I wanted. And I think there was just so much fear. And so once I told him, I felt a lot better. Actually, during this period of time, I did tell like some of our close friends and things like that, and everyone was very, very supportive. And I mean, if you're ever wondering what the right thing to do or say is it's really just being there for your friend, no matter what it is that they choose. Nobody in that situation really wants you to impart what you think they should do. There was one person that did tell me, when I told her that I decided that I wanted to get an abortion, she told me that's 100% like the right decision. And I was like, that feels weird. Like that
definitely kind of ruined the friendship, I think, too.
it was just, yeah.
It's just a really weird thing to say.
It was a weird thing to say because even though she was trying to support me in a decision that I had made, it was really just not, it didn't sit well with me because I'm like, there is no 100% right decision.
Exactly.
And so, don't do that.
Yeah, you have to give your friends space to, because I mean, the situation is already so tough. Like, why make it harder? You know what I mean? Like, let them make the decision that's right for them and support them in whatever thought process they are going through, and not like blind faith where like for instance, like that's 100% the right decision. Like,
there's no such thing.
Just be like, well, either way that it turned out, I'm here for you.
Yeah.
So,
and I think like so many of
thing.
our, like Dayon was did that really well. My parents and like so many of our friends.
Yeah, a lot of our friends.
So yeah, like I had a really, really great support system. Yeah. So essentially once I'd kind of entertained the idea of, okay, like let's go through with this. And I told Dayon and I like made it real in the world because it wasn't just in my head. And to be fair, it wasn't just I woke up this one day and I was like, okay, like to be fair, I'd been entertaining this for a while. But it wasn't until I spoke it that anxiety went away. Mm-hmm. And the next day we decided that we were going to book an ultrasound appointment because as I had mentioned earlier, we did drink and I ate oysters like while we were in New York. And so I was like, okay, but what if I had already caused complications to happen and I decided to go through with this and it just breaks my heart because like it's not going to be like a healthy fetus, I guess. Mm-hmm. And so, actually, I should have mentioned that we talked to a doctor immediately when we found out. Wow, there's so much that I skipped on that first day, but
there's honestly so many little details. I mean, there's even the moments where like I was under the impression that we were just gonna go through with the abortion, that was a decision that she wanted to make, and then there was times when she was like, oh yeah, sometimes I talk to it and go like, it's my blue baby, and then I like literally break down in tears, but like try not to like show her because it was just like,
well, it's very obvious that you're crying.
It was it was just like very emotional, and it's like yeah.
It was hard. I honestly, I was kind of talking to the baby a little bit, or I guess it was a fetus at that point.
It was the size of a blueberry. That's why she called it my little blue baby. And I was just like, oh my god.
Because sometimes I would just cry and I'd be like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, it was tough for both of us. But then so like when we saw a doctor immediately. And
so we saw a doctor immediately when we found out because I was like, I don't know what to do. Like I don't know, tell me what. Like, how do you go about your decision-making process at this point? And she was like, make a decision as soon as possible. And if you want to go through with it, here are these contacts. And if you don't want to, then go get an ultrasound as soon as possible. So I'd already had the requisition to go get an ultrasound and I just held on to it in case I did want to. So yeah, when I had decided that I wanted to keep it a couple days before my appointment, I called all the different places on the ultrasound list. And one place had an opening for that day.
That's when I knew, like, this is when all the, like, little signs started popping up.
Dayon's very, like, whatever's meant to be is meant to be. Yeah.
I believe in that, like, everything does happen for a reason. Like, even just everything. I mean, the baby was conceived on our 2-year anniversary. Like, yes, and 2 is an important number for me. There's a lot of 2s and anyways, but.
We went to go get an ultrasound that day. He looked like a little gummy bear. And right after that, we called my parents. We called we went over to your parents' house and we told everyone that we were keeping the baby and I canceled my appointment. I think like I had also decided that I was operating out of fear and that all of this, as I had mentioned before, is about timing for me. And I think I just had realized that there was so much instilled in me that was like, oh, like you have to choose your career or you have to choose family and like being a mother, whatever. And that's just a lot of like societal's expectations of you, but that has literally nothing to do with what I am actually capable of. And like, given the type of work that I do, it's very flexible. And there are a lot of women that have children and thrive and like continue to thrive in their work. And I realized that I had a lot of preconceived notions of what being pregnant and what having a child at this age would be like.
It's because of Hollywood, man.
Just because of like society and what movies tell you, and I realized that a lot of it was fear-based, and I was like, I don't want to live my life like that. It's
either like continue doing what you already know or get involved in this like whole new quest of parenthood.
And it just like, and knowing me too, like I have always kind of just been the person to take what life gives me and like throws at me and just go with it and make it work. And I've been like that always. And it just kind of felt more me to listen to my gut and go through with this like next crazy big adventure than it was for me to operate out of fear of what might happen.
Your gut tells you so much.
Yeah. My subconscious knew, and I knew deep down what it is that I wanted, but I had to talk myself through all of it to get there to that place and to be able to really listen to it, because at the end of the day, the right decision for everybody is going to be very different. So by no means am I sharing my story and being like, yeah, so like at the end of the day, like you should 100% go with it. Like there's no 100% right answer, wrong answer. Like it's really up to you, your partner, and
your
just
situation.
your situation. Like all of those things need to be accounted for, and to just be given that space is such a privilege to be able to decide for yourself what feels right for you.
Yeah, everyone's experience and like reasoning for which direction they go or choose is completely like their own, and you can't judge it. It's
I don't judge anyone for it.
There's so many factors behind it. It's a very big one, very difficult decision for sure.
Yeah. And I never would have anticipated that it would have been this hard, because I think like before we had talked about kind of like, okay, what would happen if we were in this situation? And I was like, yeah, I think at this point now, because we're in a committed relationship, I would keep it. And I like would say that with like a lot of confidence. And it really wasn't until I went through that experience that like, you know, you don't know what your brain is going to pull out of the woodworks. I didn't know that I was going to come from a place of fear or like things like that. I never could have predicted that. And also
that's the thing, you can't predict any of like how, until you're fully in that situation, you can't really like plan like, oh, I'm gonna be like this when it happens, but really it's like it's not at all.
No, you think you're gonna react a certain way, but you surprise yourself. And I think what I also really appreciated about Dayon just as a partner was that not once did we argue about our situation. And I mean, even though our initial reactions and kind of how we felt about it were different, he was very respectful of what I needed. And so never once did he like pressure me to like, okay, like, have you made a decision yet? Or like, how do you feel about this? And I didn't ever feel like if I made a decision one way or the other that we would break up or that I would jeopardize our relationship. He was very clear with telling me that whatever my decision was his fate, and that it was something that he would accept. And being able to operate and make a clear decision for me from that space was so incredibly helpful.
And I'm not gonna lie, it was tough because like there was moments where like I wanted to like put my hand on your stomach and be like, you know what I mean, or like something. But then I'm like, if I do that, that like brings attention to it in a way that I don't want to put that pressure on you, because like I already know how much you were going through mentally, and I think like it wasn't my place to make it even harder for you.
Yeah.
What I could have done was just, or what I did do was try and make it as easy as possible, get your mind off it if that's what you wanted to do, and just continue just going off of what you want. If you want to talk about it, then I was there to talk about it.
Yeah.
If you didn't, then I tried to like really, really be sensitive to your emotions and not make your decision any harder than it was.
Yeah, because now like actually thinking about it, for you to really be able to control your emotions for 3 weeks is incredibly
That's a big ask for someone like me.
I know. Actually, because now I'm thinking about it.
Ask.
Yeah. Oh, I love you.
Yeah, me too, baby. It was yeah, I mean, I'm so happy at the end of the day. Like no matter what you decided, but like yeah.
And I mean, like that's the thing, is that if I didn't go through that process, I wouldn't have known how much I wanted to keep the baby, because once I decided, I really decided, and I was like, I fucking want this.
Yeah.
And I think that's also why, like when I had mentioned earlier, like I'm not afraid of my child growing up and being like, oh my god, like it was hard for you, like you weren't so happy when you found out. Like it's unrealistic to expect. I mean, for some people, like when you know you're trying really hard to have children, you know for sure that you want it, like that's a very different experience from our experience. And for me, like once I had decided that I wanted to go through with it, I was like, this is everything.
It's something that we really wanted at that point. It's like we knew that was
what we wanted 100%.
Go, so.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this baby's going to be extremely loved, and we are so excited to meet him. So, like, everything before that in regards to, like, our thought process, I don't think that should affect anything in regards to how much love our baby is receiving or anything, so...
But it has, like, going through this process did make me think a lot about, you know, like, people talk about abortion all the time, and, I mean, actually, maybe not all the time, because it is still quite taboo, but I think that it really forced me to think about what is the difference between like a fetus and a baby. For me, the way that I see it, it's once you mentally shift in your mind what it is that you want it to be. I feel like after going through this process, every person's emotions and how you're going to take it and how you're going to experience it, it's so incredibly personal that it's just like ridiculous to me that other people, you know, making laws and things like that can pass judgment on something that is so personal. And so for me, like that shift of like fetus to baby was mental for me. And so like I know people that have gone through with abortions quite late in their pregnancy, and because they weren't in a good place to go through with it, and that's 100% their decision. And even if it was further along than when mentally for me I was like, this is my baby, then I would never say like, oh my gosh, you're killing a life form, because for them, like they didn't mentally feel that way about it. And so I don't know if I'm making sense, but I really have just come to the realization that there is no after this week or after, you know, like it's really just up to the person that is carrying
what they're ready for.
Yeah, like what they're ready for.
As.
Yeah. And so it's really interesting just going through this process, and one, finding out how many people have gone through it abortions before.
Yeah, how many people actually, like a lot of my close friends that I never even knew, like just started coming out with support and like, and then also their own experiences, which I feel normally would be like quite secretive for them. And I think it's not something that's so rare.
It's not. And I think that a lot of people do feel really, really alone when they do find out, and that if they do decide to go through with the process, but everyone feels so differently about it. And I think that respecting somebody's personal process and their own feelings towards it is what we should all do. I don't know. Yeah. It's crazy to me. Like there are laws that are created around it when it has literally nothing.
Are those laws actually still like implemented? Is that a thing?
I think in some places. So
that is so insane to me. And like we're also just so fortunate because I've heard of many experiences too where people do want to keep it and then it ends in a miscarriage and things like that. So there's still, you know what I mean? There's still like, you gotta count your blessings too.
That was definitely one of my biggest fears, because you're opening your heart up, you know, like you're allowing yourself to want something. And if it doesn't happen, and it's still, honestly, it's still a possibility. Like, I mean, I don't want to talk about stillbirths because it's so sad, but you never know. And yeah, I was really scared when I made the decision to keep the baby, that I was like, okay, what if I decide that I want to, and I know that my whole heart wants this, and then it gets taken away from me? And I was like, I don't know if I can like go through with that type of pain. And I think that is also kind of where my fear operated from as well. I knew that if I was going to love this baby, I was going to fucking love it.
Yeah, 100%.
And so it's really scary to like open up your heart in that way.
Because we'll probably love this baby more than we love each other.
I know, which is crazy.
Right? I know.
An experience.
I was like, so in the moment, like we found out we were pregnant, I'm like, I'm so ready to love this thing.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, to me it didn't matter. Like when they're like, oh, do you want a little boy or a little girl? And I'm like, really, I don't care. Like
I just want to love.
I just want a healthy baby that I can like love and just, you know what I mean? Like I don't care if she is a boy or girl.
So before we go, we have a couple questions from my followers on Instagram, and for the future I will be asking for questions on every topic so that we can kind of do a little Q&A at the end of every episode. So make sure that you follow me at Your Girl Neens. I will also be asking on Neens and Deens. You can follow us there as well. And then Dayon's is Dayon's Day Off. So the first question is, to what extent did you consider Dayon's emotions and feelings?
That's a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely 100% took it into account, in that if he had felt like he didn't want the baby, then that would have been a big indicator to me that like, okay, if you go through with this, you're probably going to go through this alone. Your relationship might also not make it. Like it would have been a lot of factors to consider. So I 100% took into account what he was feeling, and because he felt positively about it, then I was like, okay, I'm in a safe space to decide whatever it is that I want to decide. It's up to the person that's carrying, really, like how much you want to take into account another person's feeling, because at the end of the day, like it is your body, and I think that it's all things to consider. But ultimately, at the end of the day, even though people do say that it's our decision to make, it really ultimately was my decision to make, and I feel very firm about that. Like I said, like I was very grateful that Dayon also felt that way as well.
Like as the partner, like you should be really supportive no matter what the other person is going through, because it is their decision. And I think a friend of mine told me like one of her situations where a guy was like, I want to keep it, and if you go through with the abortion, like I may resent you and that's my right. But I feel like that is just kind of unfair, because for her going through like such a big decision and something that is ultimately her decision, and for her, she went through with the abortion, and then he actually completely disappeared, which I think is horrible. I think that's like, I don't know. I mean, you do have your right to like your own emotions, but I think it's already, someone is going through something so tough. Like, don't make it harder for them. Don't make them feel guilt or regret or things like that. Like, I think it's 50-50, you know, like I made the baby as much as you did, and we have to go through it together no matter what decision you make. I think it's just such a tough situation, so.
And I think it also, I mean, I feel like that kind of reaction to the situation maybe doesn't take into account all of the things that, you know, like the reality of actually raising a child together, you know, like the reality of what this person is going to go through in the next 9 months to carry. Like, there's so many things to consider outside of just financial or support or love. Like, having a child is really not something that should be taken lightly. I feel like...
Yeah, emotional support is like, should be just number one. For me, when I heard that, I was like, wow, that is so tough.
Next question. Have you talked about having kids beforehand?
Definitely. Talked about having daughters a lot.
Yeah, I guess because I don't know why my mind always went to... It's because girl names are so much easier to come up with. So
girl names, also like me braiding a girl's hair.
Yeah,
like
I just feel like you would be such an amazing father to a daughter, but I mean, honestly, to a son too. But like, there is a side of you that's like this very like feminine, warm energy that I would love to see you nurture a daughter. But I mean, we did talk about it for sure. We talked about, you know, like if it does happen, like how would we feel? And I mentioned that does not correlate with when it actually happens. But I think that when you are seriously dating somebody, it is important to talk about things like marriage, family, like the possibility of kids, like things like money, like
parenting
all of those
styles
things
as well.
I think.
What kind of lessons would you instill? All of those things are really important.
I mean, we spend so much time together that eventually we like get bored of talking about regular shit, that we just start talking about dumb stuff like this. I mean, at a bare minimum, I feel like if you're in a serious, committed relationship that is heading in the direction of something more serious like kids or marriage, then you should definitely talk about whether or not you want that in general, because it actually surprises me so much how many couples don't talk about those things, and then it comes as a surprise when one person doesn't want to have kids and the other person does, because that might be a huge deal breaker. And it's like, if that's where the relationship is heading, then like, what do you do at that point? Because love is not enough, you know? Like,
yeah, there's a lot of things you need to consider at that point.
Yeah, so we definitely talked about it.
Yeah, it's funny how much we actually do talk about the future, because like, before having a baby, we would talk so much about having kids, and then now having a kid, we're talking about high schools.
I know, because we've already covered all the immediate topics that I'm like, hey, like, should we send them to public school or private school?
Or private, yeah. Like, obviously having a baby is so cute, but like, I like always want to know, like, what are they going to be like as a full-grown adult?
Yeah,
like,
I think we say that to our friends, and they're like, well, guys, like, I mean, he's not even born yet, right? Yeah. But I feel like we've just full-on discussed everything else. And obviously, like, I mean, everything as in everything we think that like young parenthood is gonna be like, but yeah, I feel like we just discussed everything that we've moved on to high school years to adulthood.
The next question.
This is the last question. Did you feel pressure to get married after finding out?
My mom, she was like, you guys need to get married.
I think she's the only party that really
was like kind of pushing.
She's the only one that mentioned marriage, which was interesting.
Your dad mentioned it.
Did he?
Yeah, he did.
Oh, he asked. Yeah, he asked. But I think he was just more curious than he was like, okay, now you guys have to get married. Whereas your mom was a bit more, okay, like, but when's the wedding? Like, you're getting married,
she
right?
Was pushing a little bit harder.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is a great segue, because this is going to be what our whole next episode is going to be about. It's going to be all about why we decided to not get married before having a child, having like a super rushed wedding, and just like our views on it in general. So that will be super fun. Make sure that you subscribe, download, I don't really know, give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. That would be amazing.
Share it to your friends.
Yes, all the things that you would do to engage with a podcast. We appreciate all of it.
Have a great night or a good morning, whatever it may be.
All right, bye.
Bye.